Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 193. Hidden Sovereigns. William Henry Lutwyche was born on the 6th of November 1864 in Sydney and was the second child of six to Nicholas Lutwyche, who'd been born in Croatia, and Elizabeth Perry, who'd been born in England. His parents married in Sydney in 1861, and Elizabeth was 11 years older than Nicholas. Nicholas was an engineer on the Marine Board in Sydney, and Elizabeth died on the 2nd of November 1903 at her residence at St Leonard's. On the 27th of November 1903, there was a small article saying, "Lost 400 sovereigns from a teapot." A few weeks ago, Mr. Henry Lutwyche, a resident of West Street, North Sydney, was robbed of 400 sovereigns. It had been his practice to keep the gold in a teapot, which was placed in a kerosene tin and hidden under some earth in a lumber room. During the week, a man and a woman were arrested in Tasmania in connection with the loss of the money. On the same day, in another newspaper, it says, "From Sydney, called back. The steamer Wakatipu from Launceston this morning brought John Regan and Harriet Glover in custody on an alleged charge of stealing £448 belonging to the Lutwyche estate. The money is alleged to have been taken from a house in North Sydney." So 3 days later in the Sydney Truth gives a lot more detail into what happened after Elizabeth Lutwyche's death and how Henry Lutwyche had his money stolen. Heaps of hoarded gold, surprising hiding places, £440 in a teapot, £100 in an unlocked box. Henry William Lutwyche shows his gold to Mrs. Glover, who has another lover. Mrs. Glover departs suddenly, so does the gold. Illustrating the weakness of masculine human nature, where women are concerned, was advanced to another stage at the Central Police Court last week. It is alleged that the accused persons in the case, Harriet Glover and John Ryan, robbed Henry William Lutwyche of two considerable sums of money in gold. The female accused is alleged by a relative, Mrs. Janie McCann, to have a husband living whose whereabouts Mrs. McCann presumed her to be seeking. Notwithstanding, however, the alleged existence of her husband, Mrs. Glover went to nurse the mother of Henry William Lutwyche. Henry became enamoured of her, and he declared at the police court that he was on more than friendly terms with her. Her little daughter Millie, however, alleges that Mrs. Glover was on intimate terms with the male accused, Mr. Ryan, and in fact they occupied the room together at each of the hotels in which they stayed when they journeyed to Launceston. In these hotels they were registered as Mr. and Mrs. Ryan. And she had allegedly completely won the confidence of Henry William Lutwyche. The prosecutor, who alleges that the woman to whom he was making love cleared out with her real lover and over 500 discoloured sovereigns. Henry Lutwyche is a very dark, retiring-looking man who holds his head as if overwhelmed by his recent misfortunes. He alleges that he was paying his addresses to Mrs. Glover, who used to come to see his mother. She went into his service to attend his mother, and in the course of his amour, he reposed so much confidence in her that he began to tell her of his hoarded gold. This was at the ancestral mansion at North Sydney. On the 11th of October, he went beyond merely telling her about the sovereigns, and in a burst of confidence, he took her out of the house around to an unlocked shed, opened an unlocked box, and took from it a little calico bag. The bag contained money. This contained 100 sovereigns, and the prosecutor had been saving it for about 3 years. He showed her this, and he alleges she said he was a fool not to clear out with a lot. Henry, having duly paraded his wealth, lifted up the lid of the lockable box near the honey extractor, threw in the bag of sovereigns, and emerged from the unlocked shed. He told nobody but Harriet of where he kept his hoard, and strange to say, when he went to contemplate it on the following Monday week, it absolutely disappeared. He did not suspect Harriet of the theft because he had so much confidence in her.
In fact, he told her of the theft and she gave him the answer of, "What did I tell you?" Now Henry had another little lot of sovereigns, 440 of them. These sovereigns had been tied up in bags and put into a teapot. The teapot was in a kerosene tin and its contents were covered with pot ash. Harriet told Henry that she liked him and that he should trust her. Accordingly, so he says, he showed her the valuable contents of the kerosene tin, and the next day Harriet had left, and when Henry went to look for the money, it was also absent. The money belonged to Henry's mother. Harriet had received a telegram alleging to have been sent by her daughter Millie, saying her mother was dying at Cobar. Harriet, however, departed with wharf labourer John Ryan for Melbourne and afterwards to Launceston. The police got to work and found on the 17th of October John Ryan had banked £96 at the savings bank at the Queen Victoria Markets, and that those sovereigns were discoloured. It was also found that he obtained a draft in Melbourne for £815 from the Haymarket branch of the Australian Stock Bank. Having obtained the information, Constable William Henry Kennedy went to Launceston and arrested the couple and brought them back to North Sydney, where they were handed over to Sergeant Breenan. The accused reserved their defence and were committed to take their trial in the February Quarter Sessions. And in the Sydney Morning Herald on the 22nd of April 1904, in the Quarter Sessions, larceny, a large sum involved. John Ryan and Harriet Glover pleaded not guilty to a charge of having, on the 16th of October 1903 at North Sydney, stolen £100 in sovereigns and half-sovereigns, the property of William Henry Lutwyche. And there was a second count of receiving the money, a third of stealing £440 in sovereigns and half-sovereigns on the 28th of October 1903, and a fourth of receiving that sum. The Crown case was that H.W. Lutwyche was a wharf labourer and had lived with his late mother and brother and sisters at North Sydney. Harriet Glover was a married woman living apart from her husband in service at North Sydney. W.H. Lutwyche had been intimate with Mrs. Glover, who had a daughter named Millie. Mrs. Lutwyche, the mother of W.H. Lutwyche, was ill in October, and Mrs. Glover used to visit her. Ryan was an employee in the pay of the Mossman Council last year. William H. Lutwyche on October the 11th took Mrs. Glover into a shed at the back of her mother's residence and showed her £100 of sovereigns that he had hidden. The shed was not locked. Mr. Lutwyche Sr. lived at Middle Harbour apart from his wife, whose favourite son was William H. Lutwyche. At the end of the week, after W.H. Lutwyche showed Mrs. Glover the gold, it disappeared, and Lutwyche did not see the woman again until the following Tuesday. Mrs. Glover came to Lutwyche's house to look after Mrs. Lutwyche on October the 21st. On October the 28th, W.H. Lutwyche showed Mrs. Glover £440 in gold in the bottom of a kerosene tin kept in a little unlocked room on the back veranda. The money was covered with chemical manure. Mrs. Lutwyche, the mother of W.H. Lutwyche, died on the 2nd of November, and W.H. Lutwyche shortly afterwards discovered that the money had gone. He had not seen Mrs. Glover since the night she received a telegram on the 17th of October. Ryan paid £96 in gold into the branch of the Savings Bank in Sydney. The money was boiled, and Ryan stated that he'd been working at dam making and had carried the money on him. On October the 29th, Ryan visited the AJS Bank in Sydney and asked for a draft on Melbourne, stating that he did not know how much money he had. He thought it was between £300 and £350. The money was dirty, and on being counted it proved to be around £316. On the 4th of November, Mrs. Glover disappeared from North Sydney after receiving a telegram from Cobar. "Mother's dying, come at once." She took her daughter Millie, aged 12, with her and went to Melbourne, and subsequently to Launceston with Ryan, with whom she then lived as his wife. Constable W.H. Kennedy went to Launceston and arrested the accused. W.H. Lutwyche, under cross-examination, said that 4 years ago he might have told a lady that a woman named Daisy McIntyre had taken him down for money. In January 1896, some money was stolen from his mother's place, but this was traced and the police investigation was dropped. He had often bad relations with Mrs. Glover since 1895. He knew that Mrs. Glover's husband was alive and had recently come into money. Also, that Mr. Glover had filed a petition for a divorce last April, and that Mrs. Glover had filed a cross petition. Neither petition was proceeded with. The witness told Mrs. Glover that as soon as the divorce was granted, he would marry her. He did not remember telling her that he intended to put his money away so that Glover could not get damages. John Lutwyche, the brother to W.H. Lutwyche, said that he saw his mother's savings of about £500 in sovereigns and half-sovereigns last July in a shed at the back of the house. He fully trusted his brother. Millie Glover, daughter of Mrs. Glover, had most of her precious evidence as to her mother's departure from Sydney to Melbourne and thence to Launceston, admitted by the accused. She also said that her mother told her to tell Jane to say that she had sent the telegram. E.J. Redmond, the teller of the Haymarket branch of the AGS Bank, and W. Vile, assistant at the Queen Victoria Market branch of the Savings Bank, gave evidence regarding deposits by Ryan. Constable W.H. Kennedy, who arrested the accused in Launceston, said that some time elapsed between the arrest of Mrs. Glover and Ryan. Of the money found on Ryan, £2 and 3 shillings was utilised to pay a Launceston solicitor for Ryan. His Honour said that solicitor was lucky. I think he was luckier than they will be here, considering that the money is alleged to be the portion of stolen money. Kennedy continued, saying that Ryan was reported to be a close-fisted man who lived in a cheap way by himself. For the defence, Mrs. Harriet Glover gave evidence and said that she had been separated from her husband for some time. 3 years ago, she met W.H. Lutwyche in Brisbane. Lutwyche told her he could not pay his board. In March last year, Lutwyche visited her and intimacy occurred. While in domestic service, the witness visited Lutwyche and he came to see her. Lutwyche never showed her any gold in the shed. The witness was not out of Mrs. Duane's place on the 11th of October. Intimate relations existed between the witness and Ryan after she left Sydney. She did not let Lutwyche know about Ryan or Ryan know about Lutwyche. Witness's mother lived in Tasmania. Lutwyche told the witness that he would give her his money if she stuck to him. Ryan told her that if she got a divorce, he would marry her. Witness showed more preference for Ryan than Lutwyche. Witness's husband came in for a considerable sum of money last year and he promised her money. On the night Mrs. Lutwyche died, W.H. Lutwyche gave her £335 and told her to go away and come back when everything blew over. The money was in gold. The witness put the money under her pillow that night. Lutwyche had occupied the room with her while she was at his mother's house. She gave Ryan the money that Lutwyche had given her. The witness arranged with Lutwyche for a telegram to be sent to herself so that she could get away and meet him somewhere. The witness met Ryan at Redfern Station, but Ryan said there was a cheaper train than the one that evening next day, so they stayed at a hotel and went by the morning train to Melbourne. She and Ryan went by the name Mr. and Mrs. Ryan. Lutwyche thought she was going to Cobar. The witness lied to both Lutwyche and Ryan. The witness was not free to marry yet. Ryan also gave evidence and said that he'd known Mrs. Glover for 2 years. He'd saved £100 during 8 or 9 years and kept it in his hut. Last April, he and Mrs. Glover agreed to leave the country and live as man and wife, but they first decided to save money, and on that account he opened an account in the savings bank. Last September, he deposited £90. He received £335 from Mrs. Glover, kept £20 and deposited the rest in the bank for a draft. He pawned a pin and chain once when he had come out without money. He had pawned his watch on various occasions for the same purpose. Several witnesses gave evidence to the defence, some of them being decided on the point that on October the 11th, the female accused was not away from Duane's house. The jury retired and returned into court in 20 minutes with a verdict of guilty of receiving against Ryan and guilty of stealing against Glover. The prisoners were remanded for sentence. Mr. Carroll asked that Ryan be treated as a first offender. The money was all practically intact. His Honour said that he did not see how he could do so. Now that he could speak freely on the case, he would say that he could not feel a shadow of a doubt that Ryan knew well that the money was dishonestly come by. And 5 months later, on the 26th of April 1904, in the Wagga Wagga Advertiser in New South Wales, a big robbery. In the case of the prisoners John Ryan and Harriet Glover, who were convicted in Sydney on Thursday of having robbed Henry William Lutwyche at the Darlinghurst Sessions, the judge made an order that all property in the possession of the accused should be handed over to the prosecutor. There was a second count of receiving the money, a third one of stealing £440 in sovereigns, and a fourth court for receiving. The money which the prosecutor will get amounts to £447, the greater part which was on deposit at the Bank of Victoria in Melbourne. It was stated that the defendant Ryan had expressed his willingness to do what was necessary to enable the plaintiff to recover the money. And on the 22nd of September 1904 in the Sydney Evening News, when the case of Nicholas Lutwyche against Henry Lutwyche, that is, father against son, was called before Mr. Justice Pring, in the jury court this morning it was announced that the matter had been settled upon terms which, however, were not disclosed, and His Honour struck the case out. The action arose out of a claim by the plaintiff that certain monies form portion of the interstate estate of his late wife. The defendant contended that they were a gift to him by the testatrix during her life. Henry Lutwyche married Charlotte May Helmers in 1909. Charlotte had been married to Frederick Charles Howard, a storekeeper, in 1898 in Liverpool, New South Wales, and had a daughter with him in 1899, Linda May Howard. Linda married David Marr, a carpenter, in January 1922 and had 2 daughters. Linda died in 1984 at the age of 84. In the Sydney Australian Star on the 12th of March 1904. Forever and a day, a levanting husband, his blank cheque. Desertion was the ground of which Charlotte May Howard's suit yesterday for a divorce from Frederick Charles Howard, to whom she was married on the 28th of April at Canley Vale. The petitioner said the respondent was an orchardist when she married him. She was now living with her child at her father's place. Her husband and her lived together at Canley Vale until March the 6th, 1900. She then noticed that his clothes had disappeared from the drawers and her hat was torn. Petitioner went to Liverpool the same day and saw her husband. She asked him why he had left her. He replied that he was coming back and that she was a fool to think he would leave her. Nevertheless, he did not come back. On the 10th of March, she received a letter from him addressed from Sydney saying, "You old fool, you thought you had me when you went to Liverpool to get me, but you did not. So I have gone for ever and a day. If you try to get me back, I will not give you a farthing or live near you any more. You are a disgrace to civilization. You are only fit for the madhouse. But for the little baby, I am very, very sorry she came into the world to be disgraced by a mother like you. If it were not for the baby, I would not have left you anything at all. But I left you about £20 in the bank. I will send you a blank cheque with my signature on it in about another fortnight, and you can see how much is in the bank and draw it out. I remain your miserable husband." And the judge asked, "Did he send you a blank cheque?" And the petitioner said yes. "How much was there in the bank?" She said about £15 and 10 shillings. "Did he ever say anything harshly to you?" "Yes, he said he wished I was hanged." "When was that?" "About 6 months before he left me." "Did you live happily together?" She said no, and a decree nisi was granted, returnable in 3 months. Charlotte then married Henry in 1909. She was 12 years younger than Henry, and in the 1933 census they were living in North Sydney and Henry was a boat builder. They had a son, Victor William Houston Lutwyche, in 1910 in Paddington, who married Elizabeth McCropie in 1934 in North Sydney. Victor was a shop assistant, then a carpenter, and they had 4 children. Victor died in 1998 at the age of 88. Henry Lutwyche died in 1937 and Charlotte in 1943. And what became of the robbers? Well, Harriet Glover, she was born Harriet Musselwhite at Muddy Plains near Longford in Tasmania on the 12th of May 1865. Her parents were George Musselwhite and Rachel Fawcett. The New South Wales jail record says that she was born in 1867. Harriet married Walter Frederick Charles Glover in 1893 in New South Wales. Millie's birth, in fact, was not registered until 1903. It states that she was born in 1891, and family records have her born at Emerald Hill in Victoria. On the 5th of September 1900 in North Sydney, in the Gazette, it says a warrant's been issued by the North Sydney bench for the arrest of Walter Glover, charged with disobeying a magisterial order for the support of his wife. He's 36 or 37, stout build, fair hair and complexion and fair moustache and dark eyes, usually dressed in dark clothes and has a shabby appearance and is a labourer. The divorce occurred in 1903 between Harriet Glover and Walter Frederick Charles Glover. Interestingly, a man named David McIntyre was actually one of the co-respondents, so it seems that Walter divorced Harriet and claimed adultery. So Harriet received 12 months light labour on the 21st of April 1904, and she served this time at Darlinghurst Jail. On the 28th of December 1904, under the heading of prisoners released on ticket of leave, a licence under Section 468 of the Crimes Act 1900 has been issued to Harriet Glover, who was tried at Sydney Quarter Sessions on the 21st of April 1904 for larceny and sentenced to 12 months hard labour. In other words, she received a reprieve, and she was released only 8 months into her 12-month term. And Harriet's daughter Millie? Well, Millie married Robert Nagel in Wallara in 1912. She had 3 children with him in 1912, 1913 and 1915. On the 28th of April 1915, at Piermont, 2 commitment warrants have been issued by the Children's Court Bench against Robert Nagel. First for £1 18 shillings and 6 in default to be imprisoned until the order is complied for child maintenance. The second is for £4 8 shillings and 6 in default to be imprisoned until the order is complied with for wife maintenance. He's 28, 5'6" high, medium build, sunburnt complexion, brown hair clean shaved, dressed in a light brown suit with white stripe through material, a light brown soft felt hat and black boots, a wharf labourer. And then on the 29th of December 1926, in the Police Gazette in Sydney, the 2 commitment warrants issued against Robert Nagel for disobeying a magisterial order for the support of his child and wife have been cancelled, as the defendant is deceased. Millie then married Michael Curtis in Newtown under the name Harriet A. Nagel in 1930. She'd already had 2 children to Michael in 1925 and 1926. And Millie died under the name Harriet Millie Curtis in Sydney in June 1980 at the age of 89. And John Ryan, I could only find one definite account of John Ryan in the Australian Star in Sydney on the 26th of April 1904 that stated that when John Ryan with Harriet Glover was tried at the Darlinghurst Sessions, that his honour passed a sentence of 12 months hard labour. Ryan was told that after he'd served 3 months he might apply for a remission, but his honour would not definitely promise that he should recommend it. So poor Henry Lutwyche, he certainly did get diddled, and it sounds like his relationship with his father also became strained over this affair, as his father has then taken him to court to demand that the money be shared amongst the rest of the family once he was able to recover some of it.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.